What's up, guys? It's Tony here. Welcome back to the Fairweather Fan Podcast. I'm sorry that I've been on break so long. The last podcast I recorded, I believe, was April 20th. So that was a pretty long time ago. I've had a ton of work these past couple of weeks. I've been focusing on getting that done. And then I've also had, outside of schoolwork, I've had regular work. And then I was planning on recording a podcast yesterday. Um, or 2 days ago, I mean, but I was not able to. Yesterday, I had another ton of work to do. Um, but then 2 days ago, I was planning on recording another podcast when I got home from work. Wasn't able to because I was still sick. I had my second COVID vaccine shot, so that's the reason behind why I couldn't record it on the second. I pretty much was useless after the point I got home. So sorry about that. Summer is starting for me soon. I think tomorrow. I mean, I don't have any more schoolwork left, so I should be able to start doing podcasts and blogs and then posting more on social media again. But recently I haven't been able to because of all this stuff that's been going on with work and stuff. But yeah, I've got the Phillies shirt on, jersey today. It's a Kingery jersey. That's which is a shirt slash jersey for those of you that don't already know. Um, yeah, the Phillies won last night in a nail biter. It was 4-3. So they avoided losing their third straight. I don't know. I don't know anymore. The team is 14-15 now, I think. So yeah. Let's see where they are in the standings real quick. I mean, I know that they're not at the top anymore. I think they're behind the Nationals, who didn't play yesterday. Right now, it says that they're second. They're tied in games back with the Mets, but because the Mets have played fewer games and have won, because of the way the percentages work out, the Phillies are second and the Mets are third. So that's cool, I guess, but they're going to need to catch the Nationals if they want to make the playoffs because the Braves are severely underperforming. I think they'll probably pick it up later in the season, but they've lost four straight right now. So I guess we'll see where things go with the Braves, but that's probably the biggest shock this season is that um how badly the Braves have been underperforming. And that's really kind of my problem with Ronald Acuna Jr. Getting Player of the Month. I know he had a decent end of month, but he started the month out so badly. I don't think like any Phillies players should have won it. I mean, they've all been kind of lackluster to start the season. I think if anybody should have won it, I don't know if it's like based on hitter or whatnot. I think DeGrom was without a doubt the Player of the Month last month. I think he won Pitcher of the Month. Um, Player of the Month for the NL. I don't know. I wouldn't go with Acuna Jr. though. I mean, just because of the way he started. I mean, the Braves were 0-4 to start the season. Now they're 12-16. Like, it's cool he's hitting and all, but like none of the rest of the team is hitting. I guess like if you focus on him himself, that's a pretty big accomplishment to come back and get hits in like so few condensed games. And then not hit before, or really, I guess he's still hitting after that, but not hit at all before you go on that run. That's the only reason I wouldn't, I'm kind of hesitant to call him the Player of the Month, um, just because he wasn't there for the team for the whole month, and that's why they got swept by the Philadelphia Phillies of all teams. But anyway, let's move on and let's start talking about some of these topics. This is probably going to be a pretty long podcast. I'm not entirely sure how long it'll go, to be honest. But I've got four big topics to talk about, and the first one of them is Tom Wilson. If you haven't seen it already, Tom Wilson tried to kill a player again. Two of them, actually. The Rangers versus the Capitals yesterday. Buchnevich and Panarin both were involved in this incident with Wilson, and Wilson basically was I don't even know how to describe it. He was being overly aggressive, to say the least. He basically pulled them both down. Um He pulled one of them down by their hair, and he was basically punching a guy who was face first down on the ice, which raises some major red flags. And so my question is, should he be suspended? And the answer to that question in my mind is yes, without a doubt, he should be suspended. NHL player safety, however, this morning said, nah, you know what, we're not going to do that. They handed out a $5,000 fine. And that was it for Tom Wilson, for basically trying to kill two guys. Which just proves that NHL player safety is a joke. And we've known this for at least the last couple of years. But, to not even suspend the guy for a game. I mean, in my mind, in my opinion, he should be suspended indefinitely. Not specifically for this, but he's already been suspended for 7 games a season, and he's been suspended many times before the season. He is a massive liability to the Washington Capitals and to the league. And one of these days, and I said this on Twitter, one of these days, he is going to give a player a serious permanent injury. And I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. And NHL player safety, they're going to be the ones to blame for this, because they basically, every time that he's done something like this, they've given him a slap on the wrist. I mean, a 7-game suspension and a fine, cool. But he's not going to learn his lesson with that. So you would think the next step is to indefinitely suspend him. I mean, this was, I don't remember the incident earlier in the season, but I would say that this is probably worse than that. What he did yesterday is probably worse than that. I mean, he's just a disgrace to the league. And I've seen a lot of comparisons to Brad Marchand. I hate the Bruins, but Brad Marchand is a weasel. And there's a big difference between, in my opinion, between Marchand and Wilson. Wilson actively tries to hurt players. Brad Marchand, he'll have like an entanglement with a player here and there. He'll cross-check them, after a play is over. But he doesn't actively try to, kill a player. He'll try to maybe hurt them, cross-check them up high or something like that. But he won't, in the amount of time that I've watched him, the games that I've seen of him, he hasn't actually, actively tried to cause great harm to a player the same way that Tom Wilson does. And, I wonder about Tom Wilson, where is the line with this guy? Because if he's actively trying to kill 2 players and he doesn't get suspended, then what's even the point of having NHL player safety to begin with? What are these guys here for? And I don't know how many people NHL player safety employs. They have their cover photo on Twitter shows at least, I think, 3 or 4 people there. I don't know why you would hire 3 or 4 people for this, full-time employees, if they're just going to dish out little petty fines like this, and not actually suspend players and make them, hold them accountable for their actions. Because he has not been held accountable for his actions, Tom Wilson. And one of these days, he's seriously going to hurt a player. He's 27 years old. He's still probably got, I would say, 5 years in the league left at least. Probably closer to 10. So if you think that in that time he's not going to get suspended again, he's not going to cause harm to a player again, you are sorely mistaken. So I don't know. NHL player safety is just an absolute joke. And at this point, I don't know. I just don't know where you go from here. What happens next? After he comes back and he hurts another player, what do you do then? You just keep letting him play? What if he cross-checks a guy and then punches him? Or, you know what? Let's not even get into specific scenarios. But let's say that he causes a player to have a massive brain injury to the point where he's damaged beyond no return. His helmet comes off and he cross-checks him in the head or something like that. And as a result, the player has a massive brain injury. His career is over, and his life is basically ruined because he has to deal with this brain injury. What do you do with Tom Wilson? Do you give him another little petty fine? Where do you draw the line? Does he have to legitimately kill a player to be suspended? Does he, where is the line? Anyway, let's move on. Tom Wilson is a bum. I don't even want to give him more than 5 minutes of my time. Philadelphia Eagles. The draft just happened. Did Howie Roseman do a good job at the NFL draft? My answer for this is yes. I would give Howie Roseman a B plus for his drafting effort. I think a lot of other people think the same thing from what I've seen on Twitter. The first round moves turned out to be pretty genius. Devontae Smith fell past the 6th spot as Howie had hoped. And then Howie gave up a 3rd round pick to get to the 10th pick with the Cowboys own, which basically ensured that we would get Smith because he was still available at that point. And, the Cowboys were going to take Micah Parsons either way. And I think all of the NFC East teams won this draft. Maybe with the exception of Washington. I didn't really focus on how Washington did. But the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Eagles really all won this draft in the first round. The Giants traded down because they were going to take Smith, which basically showed that, basically, the Giants traded down, which showed that they were going to take Smith with their 11th pick. And the Giants wound up winning that trade, by the way, with the Bears, because they got like a plethora of picks in return. And I know a lot of Giants fans are happy about that. I don't think they won the draft, because with the 20th pick, they took somebody that Giants fans didn't want them to take. But they won the trade, at least, with the Bears. So essentially, at the end of the day, Howie gave up a 3rd round pick, and in return got a 2022 first round pick, and then he drafted the same exact player that Eagles fans thought he was going to draft if no moves had been made at all. So at the end of the day, they got the same player, and they converted a 3rd round pick into a 1st round pick next year. That is genius. Now they have 2 1st round picks next year, I believe. So that's pretty good. And, over the rest of the draft was a bit odd. I mean, they filled all the roles that they needed to. They got the cornerback that they needed to. They got a center to replace Kelsey when he retires in a few years. And then that also adds a little extra depth to the roster, I think. Let's just hope that Dickerson can stay healthy. But for some reason at the end of the draft, they got a ton of defensive ends and defensive tackles. I wish they would have gotten another cornerback or an inside linebacker. I thought they should have gotten J.O.K. in the 2nd round or Asante Samuel. But I don't know. We'll see how it works out. I would pay attention, as always, to the 4th through 7th round picks. Those are the hardest working guys because their future with the team is always up in jeopardy, whereas some of the top players, they're going to sign their contracts and they're going to be fine with the amount of money they're making. The guys on the lower end of that are still going to want to make more and stay in the league. So I would definitely watch some of those late picks. Let's hope that they turn out to be a nightmare to offenses everywhere, particularly in the NFC East. Hope that they sack Dak and Daniel Jones and whoever the hell Washington's quarterback is for years to come. But overall, I'm satisfied with the draft. I guess it's going to be a test to see if Nick Sirianni can coach these guys up to reach their full potential. I guess we'll see. We really don't know what to expect from Sirianni. I still don't even know if he's going to be calling the plays. I mean, I don't know. We'll see, I guess. Hopefully that Sirianni was the right hire. I still don't think he is, and I still don't think that the Eagles are going to make the playoffs for a while. But hey, at least we've got some fan excitement now. Devontae Smith is going to bring a lot of jersey sales to Philadelphia, the same way that Wentz and Foles did. No one's really buying Hurts jerseys right now because of how Howie treats the quarterback factory. But maybe Devontae Smith will bring some more revenue to the team through jersey sales and then through ticket sales as well. I would say this is, I wouldn't compare this exactly to when the Phillies got Harper, but it's kind of close. Because, anytime that your team gets the most recent Heisman winner, or any Heisman winner, so long as they're not past their prime, that's a pretty big deal. Um, I think a lot of Eagles fans are definitely excited about this, and I think Devontae Smith jerseys have already dropped, and I haven't seen any yet, but admittedly, I haven't really been outside too much yet, after the draft, so I guess we'll see. This summer, I expect to see a lot of Devontae Smith jerseys around New Jersey and in Pennsylvania. So good for them. They got their revenue guy, and hopefully the guy that'll bring them their next Super Bowl. But I'm not optimistic because Howie will find a way to screw this team up again. But anyway, let's move on now to two really fun topics, which is completely sarcastic. First, we'll start off with the Philadelphia Union. Should Philadelphia Union fans start panicking because of the start to the 2021 MLS season? My answer to this, surprisingly, is no. We should not be panicking. That's the optimistic answer. The pessimistic answer is we should just give up on this team entirely. We shouldn't care how they do. We should just give up on them because of how they've played not just this year, but last year. Except for the supporter shield, they won the supporter shield, but then they choked in the first round to New England. Of course, they would choke to Boston, by the way, a team that plays at Gillette. But, with the exception of 2019, they haven't had any good years. Let's just talk about this season alone. Joseph Martinez completely deserved that red card in the NYCFC game. This team has had one good half this entire season, and it was in CONCACAF, which we all know we aren't going to win. Every year, and the Americans, at the best, the American team usually gets to the final and then loses dramatically in the final. We can pool our resources and try to get to the final and win the final. I don't know what the bracket looks like right now. I know the Union could face Portland in the next round. Or they could face, I forget what the name of the team is. It's I'm not a big fan of the Mexican league, Liga MX. As much as I am some of the overseas leagues and then the MLS itself. But Portland and I don't know the name of this team. They're basically their second leg is tomorrow. Our second leg against Atlanta is tonight. There are 3 teams from Liga MX still in it. It's probably going to wind up being Cruz Azul and Monterrey in the other semifinal. Maybe the Union will get to the semifinal. I wouldn't put it past them to lose this next round, or to lose this round. Even though they're up 3-0 right now, I would not be surprised if they lost 4-0 tonight. They've had one good half this entire season. And that was the second half against Atlanta. And as I've been saying for years, this all falls on Jim Curtin. All of this falls on Jim Curtin. I know a lot of people that are Union fans are kind of casuals, so they don't really see the problems, but anybody that's been here before 2018, and even during the early stages of 2018, don't remember how bad this team was, and what the storylines were before this. because it was always the Union getting to a big stage and then losing, or getting in a position where they could make something happen and then losing. And, in 2016, they lost to Toronto in the playoffs in the first round. They didn't even really give much of an effort. I think that was our first playoff in years. 2017, they had a chance to make the playoffs on multiple occasions. They kept on getting closer and closer to the final playoff spot, and then at the very last minute, they would, they would lose a must-win game, and then they would lose another game after that, or another match after that, and then they eventually they missed the playoffs in 2017. In 2018, they had a pretty good team. They went to the U.S. Open Cup final that year. Big game against a Houston Dynamo team that was one of the worst in the league. Somehow made it to the U.S. Open Cup final. So you would think, okay, this team right now that is competing for the first seed, well, they were kind of in the race for the first seed in the East. They were more just fighting for a playoff spot, but they were in solid playoff territory. So the Union, by a long shot, were the favorites to win that match. And they got absolutely crushed. They gave up 2 goals in the first half. I don't even remember what the final score was. I turned it off after the first half. But, after that, they made the playoffs. Or, they were, even before they made the playoffs, they were in the hunt for the 3rd seed. All they had to do was win or draw. And they lost to NYCFC. And then everybody else below them won. So they didn't even get home field advantage. And they had to play NYCFC again the next match. And they lost that one as well. Also gave up 2 goals in the first minutes of the game. Basically just showing that they couldn't play in big games. That was probably the first time that I started to realize it. Like, in 2017, when I had partial season tickets, it was like, okay, maybe they're just not good enough to make the playoffs. They keep on losing these games that they need to win, but maybe it's just because they're not good enough. 2018 was a year where it was like, I kind of recognized the game, how they played. 2019, they surprised everybody. They made the playoffs. They got the 3rd seed. They could have been the 1st seed, but they got the 3rd seed. They started off their first playoff game at home in however many years, with just an atrocious first half. They were down 3-1, and they somehow came back to win, probably despite Jim Curtin. And so they won that game. They moved on to the next round. They were without Shabilko during those playoffs, so I don't really blame them for losing to Atlanta. If they had Shabilko, who knows? They could have won it all, in my opinion. But they didn't. And so, the next year they had high expectations. Then all the COVID stuff happened. They had the MLS's back tournament instead. Somehow they got to the semifinal, and they gave up another goal in the first 15 minutes, which is kind of typical for them in big games, and then they wound up losing to Portland. And I stopped watching at that point because I knew what was coming this season. I knew that they were going to have a great regular season and then choke in the playoffs. And it turns out I was right. They won the Supporters' Shield. Congratulations. And by the way, can we talk about the banner that they hung up? Like, my lord, they could not have made a bigger deal over something as meaningless as a Supporters' Shield. I mean, this isn't the EPL. You don't win any. You are not the champions for winning the regular season. They basically pulled what the Nashville Predators pulled. They hung up a huge banner. The Predators, a couple years ago, for those that don't know, hung up 3 banners after losing in, I think, the second or first round of the playoffs. They won the President's Trophy, and then they didn't really go anywhere in the playoffs. And they hung up 3 banners the next season, and everyone made fun of them. And that's what this reminded me of. They hung up a huge banner that showed that they won the Supporters' Shield. It's like, really? Really? That's just a joke. I mean, and you know, all that space that they're taking up just shows that they don't expect to win anything for a while. If they expected to win something, they would have left a little space up there. But this thing is huge. It takes up pretty much the whole left side of the wall where the scoreboard is. On the opposite end of the river end. So, I mean, it's just sad. And they did choke in the first round. They lost to New England, a Boston team of all teams. An 8th seed, nonetheless. You know, the expanded playoffs, they could have at least, you know, lost to somebody at least somewhat honorable if they wound up playing another team in the first round, if this was like the usual playoffs or what the playoffs were last year, where, you know, it was, I think, the 2 versus 7, and 3 versus 6, and 4 versus 5. Even if they played the 7th seed, that would have been better than losing to the 8th seed. You know, that's just sad. And, you know, people that still defend Jim Curtin, you know, they've only seen the Supporters' Shield. They're kind of casual fans, or they're fans that have jumped on in recent years. And it's fine to be a casual fan, but why? Just stop talking about this team like you know anything about them, okay? Jim Curtin is the Jason Garrett of the MLS. And the fans that defend Jim Curtin are the Dallas Cowboys fans that were fans the first season where Jason Garrett won Coach of the Year. And, you know, basically all Jim Curtin does is stand there on the sideline, expressionless, while his team refuses to win games that are of any importance to the team. So I wouldn't be surprised this season if the Union missed the playoffs. They have looked absolutely terrible to start this season. I don't see them getting any better, even after CONCACAF ends. You know, they have one more game until August now. And after this is all through, I still don't think they're going to win anything. I don't, because they're just not good. They're just not a good team. And Jim Curtin is not a good coach. And watch, they will miss the playoffs this year. And if I see anybody continue to defend Jim Curtin, well, it was the players, or, oh, they got to the round of 8 in the U.S. Open Cup. Who cares? The MLS is your goal. You're not going to win CONCACAF. And Atlanta sucked to start the season, by the way. They're going to get, I mean, if they get to the semifinals, they're going to get pummeled either way. You know, they're not going to win that. They're not going to win U.S. Open Cup. They need to win something in the playoffs, in the MLS playoffs. They need to win something. I'm not saying they need to win the championship. I'm saying that they need to get past the second round. Well, get past the first round first. And then they need to get past the second round. They need to show that they're real contenders. And then they need to get to the... Well, what would that be at that point? I don't know what they're doing with playoffs this season. If they're doing a regular playoff, they need to get to that semifinal. And then they need to not give up a goal in the first 15 minutes. I would be fine if they lost, if they got to the semifinal and they lost 1-0 to Columbus. That would be fine with me. I'd be completely okay with that. If they lose 1-0 or 2-1 to Columbus, you know, give up goals, in like a goal or two in the second half, or a goal in the first and a goal in the second half, I would be fine with that. Because maybe you're just not the better team. But this team, when they have to play in big games, they are so slow out of the gate. There's a reason why, if you look at the history of this team, when they play in the playoffs, or they play in any type of tournament, they always give up a goal within the first 15 minutes. It's like it's a meme at this point. Like, they're not prepared to play in these big games, and that falls on the coach. If the coach isn't doing his job and getting them to perform, getting his players to perform in big games, then he should not be the coach. If he's just going to stand there and clap his hands, then they should fire him like the Cowboys fired Jason Garrett. And by the way, Jason Garrett was fired the year after he won Coach of the Year. So here's hoping that the same will happen to Jim Curtin. And, at this point, I'm honestly like, I really hope that they do miss the playoffs, because maybe then people will finally start to realize that he isn't a good coach and they need to replace him. That's all I'm going to say. I can't stand to watch this guy coach this team anymore. He's just not a good coach, and I don't understand the hype around him. I don't understand why people still defend him. The only people that are still defending him are the ones that don't remember what this team has been like. Everyone, after they lost in the first round last year, everybody should have been calling for his head, because that was ridiculous. But anyway, let's move on now to the final topic of today, the MLB. Should the MLB start considering Robo-umps? My answer to this is yes. Yes, indeed, 100% at this point. I used to be on there's two teams. There's Team Robo-ump, and then there's a team of people that think that, if you take away the umpire, and you rely solely on the StatCast strike zone, that you're basically taking away a catcher's job, which is framing pitches, which is most of their job. And I used to be on that team, but this season, I am willing to switch teams because of how terrible the umpires have been. There have been at least 4 bad calls made in the MLB this season, and I'm probably missing some. I probably have just not heard about some. But the ones that I'm thinking of are Conforto's elbow in the Mets vs. Marlins game, where the Mets won, where Conforto stuck his elbow out over the strike zone, and the ball hit his elbow, and the umpire called it a hit by pitch when it should have been a strike. The other one was Alec Bohm when he didn't touch home plate, which admittedly replay review should have gotten this one. I'm going to talk a little bit about how they should replace whatever the hell they're doing at replay review in a bit. But Alec Bohm simply didn't touch home plate. And the Phillies probably shouldn't have won that game as a result. And you see what I'm wearing. I'm a Phillies fan, but I know they shouldn't have won that game. McCutchen running out of the base path the other night, on the other hand, that went against the Phillies, and that could have cost them the game. It resulted in a double play. He didn't run out of the baseline. He wasn't even close. And they said, oh yeah, he's out of the baseline. He was not even close. And then the best one, the unnecessary call that everybody has been screaming about for the past week, was the interference call in the Bruins-Marlins game, which was, without a doubt, one of the worst calls I think I have seen in MLB history. I mean, I think that this call was worse than, I can't even think of anything that even compares. Like the one call that broke up the Seattle Mariners guy, I think it was, the perfect game about a decade ago or so. That was at least I think it was a close play. This was worse than that. It was just unnecessary. It was the umpire was trying to, I don't know, get himself involved in the game or something. And I just don't get it. I simply don't get why you'd make that call. And refereeing and umpiring in general has been a big kind of theme with sports. A lot more focus has been on the umps and the referees in sports these past few years, or this past year specifically. With the NHL ref getting fired for saying on a hot mic that he wanted to get a penalty for somebody, I think, on Nashville, during a hockey game. Um, you know, Putting himself into the game. You know, nobody. Here's the thing that these umpires and referees need to know: nobody cares about you. You are not the attention. The attention of the game is solely on the players, the guys that are getting paid a lot more than you're getting paid to play the game. And the refs and the umps that are making these atrocious calls and inserting themselves into the game and trying to establish order and whatever, like, you are not the entertainment. You are there to regulate the entertainment. Nobody is watching the game for the refs. Except for those Islanders fans a few years ago that were, dressed up in the refs' costumes. Those guys were funny. But nobody else is doing that. Nobody else cares about you. The only reason people care about refs and umps and whatnot are when they're making terrible calls against their team, in which case they hate you. So, and I've gotten into the habit when I go to a sporting event, and a lot of other people I think have taken after this a few years later. When I used to go to Union games, I would, and this goes back to 2017, I would yell, they would announce the officials first, and I would yell, Philly has this thing where we say sucks after they announce the lineup for another team. So they'll say, like, let's say the Capitals are coming in, the announcer will say, center number 8, Alex Ovechkin, and everybody will yell, sucks, And so I would do that with the referees at Union games. And I went to a couple of Flyers games this year, and people were booing when they were announcing the refs, and I was like, "There we go. People are getting the hang of this now." So I mean, it's just at this point, like, the refs and the umps really just need to stay out of it. Just let the players play the game. No one is there to see you. And as for Robo-umps and the MLB, what changes they make to their system. First of all, I have zero confidence that Rob Manfred will make the right decision on this issue. Um, Even if 90% of fans were calling for Robo-umps, even if they held a vote and 95% of fans said that they wanted Robo-umps, they still wouldn't do it. They wouldn't. Because Rob Manfred doesn't like doing the popular thing. He doesn't even like doing the right thing. And so, first of all, the first change that the MLB should make, and I know that all these are kind of, what's the word? I can't think of the word, but all these are kind of like, hypothetical. The first thing they should do is that they should make it so the call on the field doesn't have any merit. So, Alec Boehm, the call on the field being safe, that shouldn't have any merit because while there might not be conclusive evidence to overturn it, there was, but if they want to say there wasn't, there was no evidence that he did touch home plate. And I know all the tie goes to the runner things, but if you look at the angle, there was more evidence that he didn't touch home plate than evidence that he did. From the different angles that they were looking at. And so what they do in the English Premier League, and I know that the system isn't perfect, and there's a lot of complaining about the system, but it's a lot better than what we have here. They have a VAR system where they use data, basically, to determine if a player is offsides or something like that, or like if a referee missed a call. I think the MLB should have a system like that, where they can use data like McCutcheon's base path, which I think AWS had, and see the angles of home plate in comparison to where Alec Boehm's foot is. They should use like what AWS is using, what all these companies, I think Google Cloud is another one of them. They should be using these to make the right calls. We don't even need human umpires on the field anymore. You could have the PA announcer announce balls and strikes, and then everything else could be done in Secaucus, where the MLB review station replay center is. And there should be no call on the field. Or if there is an umpire, if there are umpires, they should, have like some sort of watch or something, or something that goes on like their arm that tells them what call to make. Because they don't know how to make calls anymore. And that's pretty obvious. They've been terrible at making calls this year. And so I simply don't care about a catcher framing pitches anymore. And that having a big effect on the game, the umpires switching to Robo-umps having an effect on the catcher's position. I don't care. They still have, their job still matters because they have to throw to second. They have to worry about pickoffs. They have to still worry about catching the ball, not letting a ball get past them for a wild pitch. The catcher still has plenty of other jobs. And even before these 4 major calls, even beyond these, go to, there are these 2 Twitter accounts that I recommend, at Ump Scorecards and at Umpire Auditor. These are 2 Twitter accounts. You would think, given the content that these guys post, that the umpires are completely blind. The analytics and visuals they provide show just how terrible the umpiring has been this year. It's despicable. And it's just sad. It's sad to see what the league has become, and it's sad to see what umpiring and refereeing across all the major sports leagues has become. But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching or listening if you're listening to this on Spotify. My social media is at FairweatherFan. That's PHAN fan. My website is fairweatherfan.weebly.com. So thank you all for watching and listening, and I hope to see you next time.